I'd like to congratulate John Suntress and his Word Balloon podcast on its 19th anniversary. Nobody covers the world of comics with in-depth interviews like John does, but I can do without his constant ripping of new Star Trek. Come on, man. Give it a rest. Now on with the show.
Word Balloon is brought to you by the League of Word Balloon Listeners. It's been called one of the top 3 real Comic-Cons in the USA. August 16th through the 18th. Discover Terrificon as it returns to the Mohegan Sun Expo Center in Uncasville, Connecticut. Terrificon showrunner Mitch Halleck has assembled his biggest and best comic creator guest list to date. Jim Lee, Scotty Young, Mark Waid, Adam Hughes, Jason Aaron, Charles Soule, Scott Snyder, Greg Capullo, Brian Azzarello, alongside legends like Chris Claremont, Jerry Ordway, Howard Chaykin, Jose Luis Garcia Lopez, Louise and Walter Simonson, Klaus Janson, Lee Weeks, and dozens more. Terrificon also brings you the actors who have brought your favorite superheroes to life on the big and small screens. Michael Rooker, Charlie Cox, Star Trek actors Walter Koenig, Nana Visitor, Armin Shimmerman, Ethan Peck, Celia Rose Gooding, and many more. That's Terrificon, August 16th through the 18th. For information on tickets and guests, visit Terrificon.com. Hey everybody, welcome back. It's time again for Word Balloon, the comic book conversation show. John Suntress here, a little edition of Word Balloon International as we go across the ocean to Spain and pick things up with a writer that really impressed me with the book that we're going to talk about today. Fantastic crime comic from Mad Cave. Let me bring up the cover here, Jordan. Mugshots. There we go. And I've got the writer here now, Jordan Thomas. Welcome to Word Balloon, Jordan.
Hey, John. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. First of all, great story, man. Really, really appreciate this. How many issues is it going to be? And we'll get into. Well, I'll ask you to give us the 10-cent pitch on the story of Mugshots. But how many issues are we looking at here from Mad Cave?
So it's 4 issues, but every one is 36 pages long, apart from the final issue where I snuck in a couple little extra pages at the end. But yeah, so it's not quite oversized every issue, but you get a lot of story in each of the 4.
Absolutely. And I appreciate, too, you'll tell me, here, I'm going to look. God, I need an eye test. What's your artist's name?
Chris Matthews.
Chris Matthews. Excellent. And, well, first, let's get into the story. What? Tell me about this. This is a great street level, seems to be set in Britain. But yeah, tell me about the street level crime story.
Yeah, so it's, I guess, the kind of idea. I'm a huge Brubaker and Phillips fan, so I adore Criminal, especially, but like all their books. And I think the original idea was trying to do kind of a UK version of Criminal that obviously kind of builds out that wider world, that kind of wider underworld, I guess. And so this is kind of the kickoff story in hopefully what will be many more. And it starts with the girl, the young lady you can see on the cover, Grace, who's around 18 years old. And she gets kidnapped kind of mysteriously at the beginning of the story. And then we meet up with her uncle, who is the man trying to catch her falling off that gun on the cover, John Bannon, Uncle John. And he is basically like a career criminal, like a con man, the kind of guy who, like, he's probably not the guy you're going to send to kill someone, but he'll get involved in pretty much everything else in the world of crime. And he gets the call from his sister, Grace's mum, to come back to Brighton, which is his hometown, to try and basically find out what's happened to Grace, because they don't trust the police. They think that the local crime family may be involved. But the big kind of fly in the ointment is that John has had to flee Brighton 6 years before because he had a big falling out like a kind of "I'll kill you if I ever see you again" falling out with the local crime boss Harry Woods, whose son also happened to be dating Grace. So it's kind of it's crime, but it's got a lot of that kind of soap opera stuff of everyone being involved with each other and all the relationships being heightened. And yeah, hopefully it kind of taps into films that I love, like The Long Good Friday, and it's got a bit of that kind of comedy with Lock, Stock and the Guy Ritchie stuff as well, which me and Chris both loved when we were growing up together in a little village just outside of Brighton.
That's great, man. And Chris's art wouldn't reflect this, but Uncle John kind of reminds me of a Jason Statham sort of character, as far as, you know, that kind of street level guy that, you know, can settle things when needed and stuff. But as you say, is on the run from these people he's going to have to deal with. No, really great. Now I'm going to bring up the cover again because I'm a sucker for black and white comics, but this isn't per se a black and white comic because there is a monochrome palette depending on the scenes that you guys do, and this cover obviously is indicative of that. That's a great choice, and I'm glad you guys aren't afraid of. Would you call it monochrome? I don't know how you.
Yeah. I think it's a monocolor comic or something like that. It's interesting because obviously, so going back to some of my favorite comics of all time, the Darwyn Cooke Parker adaptations are some of my absolute top 10 ever. And that's kind of, I guess, what your mind would immediately go to when you see this style. And interestingly, Chris is not the comics fan that I am. So Chris's interaction with comics, like we've been friends since we were like 11 years old, me and Chris. So he would I think I was reading like Hush, the Jeff Loeb and Jim Lee Batman stuff when I was a kid and different stuff like that. So he'd like pick those up off my floor when we were playing Grand Theft Auto 3 together when we were like 11, 12 years old. But he's not like a hardcore comics guy. But he does come from an animation background. He was the lead designer on the most recent Sesame Street cartoon series. So he's like won awards in animation.
Wow.
And it's thing that although he'd never seen Darwyn's work on the Parker books, because Darwyn came from animation as well, I don't know if there's something in that in the design kind of they like that monocolor approach maybe. But
I love it.
Yeah, I like it works as well because what we kind of decided to do with the color, like where you saw that it changes in scenes, we tried to use it a bit like music in a film. So when something's about to get a bit heavy, when it's going to get a bit violent or dangerous, it turns orange. So like when you're watching a film and you hear the music change and you're a bit tense, you're like, oh God, what's going to happen here? We tried to do that with the color in the book by having the orange come in when something bad is about to happen.
Well, that's great. And truly, Chris's art is different enough for Darwyn's that it didn't even occur to me specifically thinking of when Darwyn would do the Parker adaptations, for example. So yeah, but I love it. And just like you guys, man, I'm a sucker for Brubaker and Phillips. I think Criminal is great. Is this your debut, Jordan? What have you done prior to this?
No, so I did the first book I had out was with Scout Comics, a horror book called Frank at Home on the Farm, which was like a kind of 1920s UK folk horror type thing, a little bit like The Shining on a farm, but with some kind of David Lynch and Wicker Man vibes. And then I did Weird Work Image with Shaky Kane, and The Man from Maybe at Oni Press with Shaky Kane, who's kind of an old Deadline 2000 AD artist that you can see. I got the cover to one of them on the wall.
I'll zoom in.
So yeah, that's one of the books that I did at Image.
That's great, man. No, I'm a Shaky Kane fan. Absolutely, I know his stuff. So that's terrific. Yeah, that's wonderful, man. And you were telling me off the air. Are you aspiring to get into film and television screenwriting as well?
No, that's what I studied at university. But to be honest, that world is not loads of fun. I much prefer writing comics, I think, to having to deal with any of that. So yeah, I think I've gone kind of the other way from looking at a career in film and TV to being like, no, I think just getting to sit down with like Chris is my buddy or Shaky or whoever I'm working with, and the fact that kind of just a couple of you can make whatever story you want is a lot more appealing to me in comics than having to get, like, even doing a short film, you have to pull so many people together and time and money. Whereas, yeah, no, I love making comics, so I'm very happy doing this for the time being.
I can appreciate that. I'd love to see you and Chris maybe adapting what you've done and then making an animated thing, because it's I really the Japanese have us beat as far as adult stories like crime stories and stuff, and that's kind of what I've been looking for. Really, the last 25 years, man, when I really got back into comics, it was so great to see so many great crime comics. And I think of things like the things that David Lapham wrote, and God, and even in superheroes, the way that Brubaker and Greg Rucka were able to kind of meld superheroes and crime comics. Brian Bendis and another.
Yeah.
That.
I mean, I did the classic thing of I loved comics as a kid, and I was super into superheroes. Lots of supers in that sentence. And then I kind of dropped off for a bit, going to university, and it was like my final year in university where I found iFanboy podcast, if you know that one.
Oh, of course, those are my friends.
And Word Balloon. So getting to come on Word Balloon is like a kind of bucket list kind of crazy thing that I couldn't imagine would have happened a couple of years ago. And you guys talking about Bendis and Brubaker and having them on to be interviewed, and like Bendis's Daredevil run was a huge one for me. And then watching people like Brubaker go from kind of Cap and Daredevil doing kind of 70s movies in superhero comics, and then moving on to their own independent stuff. Like, they're definitely like kind of my generation of writers that I love.
That's cool. We mentioned Darwin. One of my great regrets is never getting him on Word Balloon. He was a convention buddy, and I would have casual conversations with him. And I remember too, one of our last conversations, letting him know that my younger nephew really got into the Parker books, and he even drew in a IDW single Parker graphic novel. A great little remark of Parker and stuff. And my nephew, it's still to this day, it's like, I can't believe the artist drew in the book. And I'm like, yeah, man. I go, that's what comic people do. So it was. I miss him. I really, and God, it was only a couple of weeks ago was the anniversary of his passing, and all of us always take a moment, and it's just like, what a tragic loss, because he was just brilliant. Yeah.
Oh yeah. He's one of my absolute tops of all time. Both the Parker stuff, but then like New Frontier is probably, if I was going to hand anyone like a book and say like, here is DC to see if if it's your thing, then New Frontier would probably be the book I'd give him.
That, and also that great collection of Darwin stories too that they put in hardback. And I can't remember the name of it right now. It probably was.
It's got like Batman Ego and all those shorter bits in there.
Yes, and it's stuff that was in Solo, that Mark Chiarello series of comics that highlighted artists and stuff. Yeah, Darwin was amazing. Here's a comment from Damien. I was wondering, was Chris behind the whole stylistic choices for the book, or is that something you guys worked out together? And also, did you pitch any ideas to him before starting the book, or as you guys were going along?
So the way that it worked was, so as I said, me and Chris had been friends since we were kids, and Chris was working in animation, and I'd started making comics on Kickstarter. So I was like self-publishing my own stuff. And I just got a message from Chris one day saying, like, I don't feel like I've drawn anything for years. Like, working on Sesame Street is kind of just putting like shapes together. He was like, I just put like a circle onto a square, and like that's kind of it. So he was like, I've seen you doing these comics. Do you have like a script or something lying around that I could have a go at drawing, just because I want to actually draw again? And so then we had a bit of a chat back and forth about what type of story he wanted to do, and he's like, I'll do anything. And then I asked a couple of questions, and it turned out he didn't want to do anything. He didn't want to draw lots of different characters, and he didn't want to do a team. He didn't want to do this and that. So we focused in on doing a crime book. So before this Mad Cave series, we actually did a one shot on Kickstarter, which is its own standalone story, but the characters kind of cross over. And so we did that on Kickstarter back in 2020. But yeah, we kind of settled on crime together, and I wrote the script, but then all of the visual side is Chris. So he came up with how he wanted to do it. I think like he really likes the limited color palette, but I think it's also a bit of a case of Chris is kind of a control freak with all of his art. Like he can't have anyone else color him. He likes to try and do all the design on the books. So I think because he was kind of so we did this one shot on Kickstarter, which is like 25 pages, and then this is Chris's like next comics work. So he's still very new to the medium, and I think like just doing the one color approach meant he could really focus on his storytelling and just the general art without getting kind of bogged down in color theory and all these kind of other things that he obsesses over. So I think that's part of why as well that he settled on the one color approach, but that was very much all him.
Well, again, I think his storytelling is very clear, and I like his art style. It's great. I'm sorry I didn't think to put up some images from the book. But again, you can tell a bit from that cover. It is indicative of his style, certainly. And all I can say is it's terrific. You're in Spain. Is Chris in Spain as well?
No, Chris is in Berlin. So yeah, we're two kind of English lads from the south coast of England, and one of us has ended up in Spain and one in Germany. I don't know how that happened, but well, I guess we both just wanted to get out of England, I think.
Well, I mean, you're not certainly. I think the other Brit that I've talked to consistently that is based in Spain is, of course, the great Pat Mills, and it's been wonderful forging a relationship with Pat over the years. How many other expats and not only from Great Britain, but other countries are near you and in the Spanish, the Madrid comic community, or close enough to where you are?
So I'm in Valencia, which is on the east coast by the beach. It's like the third biggest city in Spain. And my best buddy here is Kian Tormey. If you know Kian, he was the artist on the most recent Alan Scott Green Lantern series.
Yeah.
Like, he's an amazing artist. He's a DC exclusive guy. You probably thought his name was like Sean or something, but yeah, Kian. He's got one of those Irish names that people have to have like explained to them first.
Like my buddy Owen McCauley. He spelled it E-I-O-N. And and I'm like, he's like, no. Yeah. But
so Kian's my best buddy here. And I was mentioning to you before we started that former DC editor Jim Chadwick has also moved down here. So me and Jim, there's a cinema in the center that's like council run, and it just shows lots of classic films. So they've been doing like contemporary westerns recently, so like The Wild Bunch, Man Who Shot Liberty Valance, all that kind of stuff. And so me and Jim go to a lot of those movies together. He's kind of my old movie buddy. And then besides that, I guess like it's mostly just becoming friends with the Spanish guys. Like not many of them live in Valencia, but we go to a lot of the different conventions here, and conventions in Spain are pretty different to the UK or the US in that there's no like tabling. It's all like publisher booths. So publishers will come and they'll set up like signing sessions with their different creators. So maybe Pepe Larraz will sit for an hour and sign X-Men books or whatever, but you're not stuck behind a table. So it's always a very social thing. Like Spanish people love like a 2.5 hour long lunch and then like a 3 hour long dinner in the evening. So we go to a lot of that stuff. So it's strange because I guess I got into comics not into comics, but making comics whilst living in Spain. So although I've got a few friends in like the UK comic scene, like Martin Simmons is a good buddy who does the Department of Truth. Like he's an awesome guy. But most of the like friends I have in comics are Spanish from being here. So, and it's such an amazing time in Spain for comics talent. I mean, you got like Jorge Fornes, Pepe Larraz, Iban Coelho, Bruno Redondo, Alvaro Martinez Bueno. Like it's like a non-stop list of just amazing guys here. So if you go to a convention here and they haven't like brought in any international guests, like occasionally like they'll get in a James Tynion or a Tom Taylor or someone, but mostly it's just Spanish guys or the different kind of Spanish creators here. And it's still like an amazing lineup. You'll get like 8. Like we went to a little small event in Bruno Redondo's village a few weeks ago that he set up himself. He does a Nightwing with Tom Taylor. He's like absolutely incredible artist. And the guest list was like me and Kian and Jim went from Valencia, but then it was like Jorge Fornes, Iban Coelho, Carmen Carnero, Daniel Sampere. And that's just like a little handful of Spanish guys that they could pull in for a tiny little convention in a village that maybe 30, 40 guests come to. And the rest of the time, we're just kind of sat around having some beers and eating tapas and things.
That's excellent, man. Is R.M. Guerra active at all? I haven't seen him really on the scene since Scalped back in the day.
I don't know. Is Zoran Garris definitely Spanish? I don't know if if he's
and
Spanish
maybe I'm mischaracterizing him.
He definitely could be. It's not like I haven't met like I've never met Marcos Martin, who's another amazing Spanish artist. So there could be people that I'm just not sure. I'm never totally sure, South American or Spanish. But R.M. Guerra is currently actually doing Judge Dredd with Rob Williams.
Yeah. Oh, who's writing it?
Rob Williams.
Oh, wow. I had no idea. That is so good to hear. And Rob's a friend, so that's excellent. Wow.
Oh, yeah, Rob's cool.
That's great. I mean, honestly, Jordan, I dip in and out with 2000 AD. And I'll be honest, I haven't read enough Dredd to really have an opinion. I like some of the other side series like Rogue Trooper, and I was a big Sinister Dexter fan back in the day, and Nikolai Dante. So it's always been like those kind of other things from, if not Rebellion, other British publishers and stuff. That, but I just had Andy Diggle on talking about his 2000 AD days. In fact, that's why you saw that Daredevil cover earlier. That was left over from my talks with Andy. So that's cool. Well, I was really glad you. Go ahead.
It's just a very British thing to be like, anthologies are not very popular and they're a very hard sell. So England just goes with our main comic being an anthology. It's very British kind of exceptionalism approach to comics, where like, this isn't popular anymore, but it's pretty much all that we will do. So yeah, it kind of doesn't. I didn't really grow up with 2000 AD. Like, I knew the characters, but I think like I'm a very collector mindset. So I love getting, like, when I got into a different, like, I love Hellblazer, and the first issue of Hellblazer came out like the year I was born. So before I would start reading it, I went on like a huge like back issue bin hunt and eBay lots and stuff, getting like the full collection up to date of Hellblazer. And I really like that. But then 2000 AD, because like stories are in the middle, stories are starting, stories are ending, it kind of messes a bit with my my collector brain, that you don't get everything. Like, just picking up an issue in the shop, you're going to be in the middle of something, the start of something, the end of something. And yeah, I think that's a very different way of comics to the US. So I always just buy the collections. Like, I just bought the Nemesis the Warlock like definitive edition, which is Pat and Kev O'Neill, which I've always wanted to read. So yeah, so I'm looking forward to getting stuck into that. But just being able to buy like a thing that has all of it appeals to me more than the 5-page kind of chunks.
But I really appreciate that 5-page format, because I always say this to writers. I think that's a great way as a discipline to be concise with your panels and really, put forward a story. And even a lot of those one-shot future shocks that we get in 2000 AD, I'm like, those are great little tight stories, tight ideas and stuff. And because it is different from American comics, I guess I love that too. And of course, being older and stuff, I remember when I first was buying comics in the 70s, that there were still anthologies, All-Star Western, and some of the war books and things that were, usually like 5 and 8 page stories. So no, I can appreciate that. Damien, reflecting on the list of Spanish creators, he's like, they're all awesome. Bruno Redondo and Jorge Fornes are some of my heroes. He wanted to ask, did you have trouble learning Spanish?
Yeah, I didn't think that we'd have to cover one of my main shames on the show live on Word Balloon. No, my Spanish is okay, but it should be way better because I've been here a long time. So I can kind of chat in Spanish, but I probably sound like a not super bright 5-year-old when I speak Spanish. It's part of the problem, I guess, when your job is like sitting in your apartment writing the whole time. Like most weeks, especially when my best buddy here is an Irish fella. So I probably don't practice as much as I should. But yeah, I have lots of trouble learning Spanish. I don't have a particularly good brain for languages, but I try my best.
Is Valencia internationally minded enough that there are enough English-speaking stores and things that you are able to get by, or
Oh yeah, I mean, my Spanish is more than good enough to like have any kind of conversation you'd have to have in like a. I can have a proper conversation and things, but probably I wouldn't be able to get kind of deep into physics or anything like too complicated. But yeah, no, probably in Spain now they're really pushing like people to learn English to help with them getting work, I think. So yeah, it's to be honest, that's probably part of the problem bit as well, is that you can live in Spain as a Geary, as they call us. That's their kind of mild insult to all
I like
the
Gary.
English
I like
Germans and stuff here.
that's
But yeah, you can kind of get by without speaking great Spanish. But yeah, no, I'm okay. I could definitely, I'm super impressive to any of my family when they come over and visit. If someone can't speak any Spanish, they'd think that I'm amazing. But if you can speak Spanish, then you'd be very aware of all the mistakes that I'm making.
honestly, when I speak to creators where English is their second language, and as you were saying, and that's a great way to describe it, like physics, but they are able to explain their creative process and really get into some complex subjects. I'm like, listen, man, I took 5 years of between high school and college of Spanish, and it helped me rudimentally when I was covering boxing and would be and watching a Spanish telecast and hearing boxers give their post-fight interviews, and I get a gist of what they were saying when I was really more in the mind of thinking in terms of Spanish. Could not do the complex things, and I forget what nationality Victor Santos is, for example, and I'd have him on, and it's like, man, Guerra for that matter, another guy, and I was also wondering. I think Chris Peters I thought was Spanish, and maybe not. And again, sometimes you get confused with the South American Hispanic community versus people from Spain. So I could be wrong, but Rod Rice, great Brazilian.
Oh yeah, he's amazing. I love his work. Yeah,
and brilliant artist and a really good friend. I just saw him at C2E2 as well. And yeah, that's a guy that I've known for several years. No, and really, I do appreciate. Again, Americans, we're all farmers, and we're so insulated in our big ass country. And then, I've only been to Europe twice, and I'm going to Ireland actually in August for one of their conventions.
Nice.
I'm really looking forward to it. But it is such a pleasure to get to know people internationally, and really, God, even like I said, going to Ireland. My buddy Steve Mooney, my buddy Declan Shalvey, and because even my family's like, well, beyond the convention, are you going to be able to be social? I'm like, yeah, I got like three good Irish friends that I'm really looking forward to hanging out with and stuff, and so. But even more so when I do meet, as we were talking about two great Argentines, Gabriel Ba and Fabio Moon, the brothers, and yeah, it's like, oh man, they were we were talking about that. Fabio was in Chicago the year before. And it was just great to see him. And it's like, oh man, it only broadens your mind when you get to rub up against other people from other cultures and stuff.
I wish it's a great part of comics as well, right? Like comics, like the conventions, like it's a business where you spend most of your time by yourself, but then everyone gets kind of pulled together for a convention, and it's like people's like one weekend of the past 6 months where they're kind of a little bit free and can have some fun, and you get to hang out with people from all over the world. I actually met Declan for the first time 2 weekends ago at the show in London. And yeah, I think we ended up in the bar till about 3 a.m. or something. And me finding out that although my hotel was like just on the other side of the convention center because of construction work, the whole thing was closed. So you had to like do like a half an hour round loop to get back to the hotel at 3 a.m. But yeah, no, it was a fun time.
That's great, man. So you say you grew up with superheroes, and that surprises me, frankly, because again, you'll forgive the generalization, but sometimes it seems like the other countries are just kind of when it comes to superheroes. So who were your favorite superheroes growing up?
So I got into comics, like characters, I guess, first, like more so than comics themselves, where my dad, we'd go to, in Brighton was one of the only kind of comic related shops when I was a kid. And I got really into the trading cards. So from about 3-4 years old, I'd go like every weekend with my dad into Brighton and get packs of the I think, is it like Fleer, Marvel Fleer series and stuff, like the collectible cards. So I got really into the characters from that. So I think, to be honest, to start with, I probably liked all the ones that had like giant guns. So I didn't really know who was more important. Obviously, I knew Spider-Man and Batman and Superman were the big ones. But then once it went past the like A-list guys, it was a bit of like, oh, I just had the cards and I would just make a decision based on how they looked. So I remember liking people like Random. He's the guy with the giant gun arm from like X Factor or something. And I was like, oh, he's got a massive gun. He's very cool. So I liked a lot of that when I was young. And then I guess, getting into the comics, a lot of my favorite stuff for superheroes is like Daredevil stories. Born Again is probably like my favorite superhero story maybe ever. Certainly like a main continuity story. And then Bendis's Daredevil, Brubaker's Daredevil. So I love him. But in general, I was big into the X-Men cartoon series that was coming out when I was like 5-6 years old. So I love that. The Batman animated series, I had like a sticker book of that, I remember, and would always watch that. So I guess like I was probably only about 11 when I really started like reading comics properly, like being like, okay, I had like a pull list that just had like the Ultimate stuff on, because the Ultimate stuff was a bit more accessible, I suppose. Like when Spider-Man was at issue like 550 in Amazing or something, having like Ultimate Spider-Man that was just at issue like 25 was cool. And the Ultimate seemed like the coolest book of all time, with like a horny Hulk crashing along a building trying to get Freddie Prinze Jr. or something. And so I loved all of that stuff. That was kind of my entry into really like reading regular comics. But before that, I guess I just knew like all of the characters and who they were from the cards and the cartoons. But I love superheroes.
No, that's great, man. Did you watch? Has X-Men 97, the new Disney cartoon, has that made it over to Spain? Are you able to watch it?
Yeah. No, I started watching it. I enjoy it. I think there's probably something. I tried to watch like the old X-Men cartoon a little while ago, and I completely did not realize when I was a kid how bad the animation is in that cartoon. So it's cool to see it like with the same look and an updated animation. But I don't know that you can quite recapture the joy I had as a kind of 6-year-old watching that. But no, definitely it's cool. It's cool that it's getting a little kind of retro comeback.
That's funny. I was a DC kid, and again, I'll be 60 at the end of the year, and so I had hand-me-down Silver Age DC comics from my older brother and cousins and that, and just as you're describing, it was Marvel animation that from the 60s that was in syndication. So that Marvel Superheroes series was in reruns and weekday afternoons, and the Ralph Bashki and Greenway Spider-Man series of 67. That was my Marvel until I really started buying comics on my own in the very early 70s. So I always associated Marvel more with cartoons, even though there were DC cartoons as well. But and of course Adam West Batman. Were you an Adam West Batman watcher?
Yeah, definitely. I think I had the movie on like VHS and watched that a lot as a kid.
Sure.
I was a big fan of that one. I remember I had an X-Men cartoon on video. I don't know what this would have been from, but Wolverine had like an Australian accent.
Yes.
I don't know what era that was from, but I remember having that VHS as well. He's in the cool kind of brown and gold costume in it.
Yes. I know exactly what you're describing, and I unfortunately, being older, I mean, those were probably like my high school or college years, so I wasn't watching that stuff. God, it's really been an education. There's a documentary series that right now is on Amazon here in the States. I don't know if it is in Spain, but it really is the history of Marvel, and it's icons, and it's all about Marvel starting in the 30s with their comics. But it's been a real education of a lot of the 90s cartoons that I watched. I watched Silver Surfer back in the day because I thought that was really well done. I hear what you're saying, though, about the crudeness of some of the animation, including the stuff I grew up on, the Marvel superheroes. My God, they literally would take panels from the comics and just kind of tilt one for an action thing, things like that. It was great, though. I mean, I didn't care. It was fun. And I mean, you're a sucker for those uniforms and just the look of that stuff. So I get it. But yeah, it is interesting the ways we get into comics. And I know there are people that wring their hands about, oh, will they ever get into reading the superhero stuff that we love? And they're kind of like, oh, they read, kids now, they read Captain Underpants and Dogman and all that stuff. And I'm like, hey, whatever they're reading, that's fine. And if it leads them to our kind of comic books, great. But if not, there's enough of us still around that it's still thriving. And I think that's cool. Would you want to write any superhero books?
Oh, yeah, no, definitely. I have had some vague conversations around that kind of side. So we'll see, maybe sometime in the future. But yeah, no, I'd love to do the full big two superhero part of this kind of job. As like you said, like growing up with the stuff, like always loving it. And I still read, like I'm a big comic reader now. Like I'm not one of those guys who's kind of like, oh, I read comics a lot when I was a kid and I've stopped now, even though I'm making them. Like I've got the Marvel app and the DC app here. So I'm always reading stuff off of those. I was reading through Peter David's Hulk run. Like they're amazing. Those apps, like, I don't know, like it just seems crazy because they're not expensive and everything is on there. And it just seemed kind of wild. But yeah, like you can just read kind of everything. Like, so I keep choosing, I'm doing Jeff Johns' Green Lantern at the moment. Because I guess just because like he was Hal Jordan and there aren't many other superheroes called Jordan, I always liked him as a kid. So, and I read bits of it, like I read Rebirth, like that. Rebirth really stands up as a great Green Lantern story, and so now I've kind of carried on into the main book, which I read a little bits of when it was coming out, but I didn't get like everything because that was just as I was kind of getting back into the comics. But yeah, no, I love still keeping up with everything that's going on, and there's still some really cool stuff being written.
Well, your buddy that drew the Alan Scott miniseries with Tim Sheridan doing the writing, Alan Scott's always been my favorite Green Lantern because I grew up on Hal, and then I found a reprint. I think it was in one of those 100-page spectaculars of the 70s, and the main characters were Dr. Fate and Hourman fighting Solomon Grundy. And it was a showcase story from the 60s. And at the very end of the story, Alan Scott shows up. And they're like, oh, Green Lantern. Wow, I'm so glad you're here. And I'm like, that's Green Lantern? The blonde guy with the purple cape and the red and green outfit and blonde hair? I'm like, who the hell is that? And then I learned, I'm like, oh, no, it's Earth 2 Green Lantern. Completely fascinated me and devoured any Alan Scott stories. And I always say, Tynan and Tim, when they made Alan Scott a gay character, I know James Robinson did it with Earth 2, but that was a different Alan Scott. It wasn't your classic DC Universe Alan Scott. I think they've done nothing but a tasteful job in terms of really an intriguing story of what happens when you've got you're in the 1940s, and not only do you have to worry about your secret superhero identity, but also the fact that you're a closeted man, and it's like, that is very interesting. And it reminds me of what I loved about the Cavalier and Clay novel that Michael Chabon did. And it's like, okay, I'm intrigued. And I'm intrigued as a cisgender white guy, It's like, that's really cool. I'm like, I don't remember reading a story. I mean, I've appreciated characters like Midnighter and certainly, now I'm blanking, the other guy from The Authority.
Apollo.
What's
Apollo.
that? Apollo. Shit, I'm a Greek guy, and I don't remember a guy named Apollo. What the hell's wrong with me? But yeah, I'm like, okay, that's cool. But it really was like, wow, what do you do when you're in the Justice Society and you got to worry about your sexuality as much as your secret identity? It's like, that's intriguing. And I really thought the guys did a hell of a job on that Alan Scott miniseries. It just wrapped up for people who are watching and haven't read it yet. I can't recommend it enough. I think it really was one of the more successful Justice Society kind of stories. And I've always been a Justice Society fan, again, because I caught all the reprints of when they would do the Justice League crossovers, and the costumes were always intriguing compared to the Earth 1 DC heroes.
Yeah, no, I love the JSA stuff. I really loved Jeff Johns' JSA run as well back in the day. I think I managed to get like the whole of that in one like eBay lot one time, like 40 issues or something. I love that. But yeah, no, the guy, they've done amazing on Alan Scott. I guess it's like taking the retcon and making it actually a strength of the story is something that you don't see very often. And yeah, they've done an amazing job. And I feel kind of oddly part of that book is because me and Kian will meet up once or twice, 3 times a week for coffees or a beer or something, and kind of chat through what we're doing. I was kind of with him through pretty much the whole of that. And it was weird because we were at Barcelona Comic Con. This is more of a story for him to tell, really, if you get Kian on the show. But yeah, we were at Barcelona Comic Con a few weeks ago, and he just wrapped up the final issue. And I remember the year before we were at Barcelona Comic Con, and that was when he just received the script for the 6-page kind of intro story that I think they did in the DC Pride annual. So it was like this kind of bookended year with Barcelona Comic Con at either side. And yeah, the whole team did an amazing job, and Kian did beautiful work on that book.
You know, honestly, I'm going to bug you email wise, and yeah, you have to give me his contact info because I'd love to talk to him about that.
Oh yeah, no, he'd love that as well. He loves talking process and making comics.
That's great. No, that's excellent. Yeah, the whole I don't for people who haven't read it, there's a really sad personal story going on with Alan Scott, as well as just you're getting a year one kind of essentially look at Green Lantern. And yeah, it really is. It's great. And taking the best parts of the Golden Age stuff, because I read all that Golden Age stuff when I was still a 10-year-old and a 12-year-old. So, and that stuff was written for 10-year-olds and 12-year-olds. And it's, you know, some of it is kind of rough coming at it as an adult. You appreciate it as an artifact of that period, but it really is simplistic in terms of its plots and things like that. I loved when Guy Davis and Matt Wagner and Steve Siegel took the original Sandman stories and expanded them into Sandman Mystery Theater. And it was like, wow, now adults are playing with this stuff and really giving us, I mean, a 10-page story would end up being, you know, a 6-issue mini within the series and stuff. And it's like, no, that stuff's great. Hey, look at this. Ed Cato's on the chat. Yay for GL and Golden Age stuff. And I dig Mad Cave. Yeah, seriously, Jordan, I'm glad to talk to you. And a lot of my friends are now doing work for Mad Cave. My buddy Art and Frank, my buddies Art and Frank are doing that Flash Gordon thing that looking forward to.
The kind of kid Flash Gordon.
Yes, absolutely. You know, kind of a parody in the best ways. But really, man, Mad Cave has really come along strong. How are they to work with as a writer?
Yeah, no, they're great to work with. I mean, they've got Mike Martz in there, who obviously has an awful lot of experience, like in the world of comics, and some really nice editors. And I guess you feel like they're really pushing, like the growth is pretty, like, big giant leaps seem to be happening all the time. Like, it was only a few years ago, I guess, that they were more doing kind of their in-house properties, which all had a little bit of a 90s image kind of vibe to them, which obviously very popular with a lot of people, but not necessarily my kind of thing to write. But then David Hazan had that Nottingham book there, which kind of really blew up. And since then, they've been pushing like a lot of create your own stuff. And now they've got Dick Tracy, Flash Gordon, Gatchaman, all kinds of different things. They've got like multiple imprints as well, because the editors there are always saying to me, like, oh, have you got any ideas for middle grade or young adult? And I just, you know, the other week, like the editor was telling me that I couldn't use this particular swear word we use a lot in England so regularly in the scripts. I'm not sure I'm right for the young adult line. But yeah, they've got like a lot going on, and definitely like the quality is going up and up all the time. I get sent like a lot of the issue ones from them, and there's a lot of really good stuff coming. And they did like a Dan Panosian book not that long ago. I think it was like a reprint of a one maybe Dan released in France, but Dan's just one of the best artists working right now. And yeah, no, I think they're definitely like, they feel like a really good publisher to be with, and they've been really great on mugshots. Like I said to you that it's 36 pages an issue, and when me and Chris, so we pitched it around. It's basically like it was going to be on Kickstarter originally when we kind of started to do the follow-up after the first one. Because Chris was working so much on his animation job, it was taking him a long time to get through the pages. So in the time between us kind of starting the follow-up and Chris getting anywhere with it. I'd had like the book with Image, and I had stuff coming out from Oni and things. So I was like, I think that I might be able to get us some money to make this, and you can go. Would you go full time if I could get you a decent page rate? And we had a couple of different options with some really good publishers for it, but Mad Cave really, really seemed to want it, and they were flexible. Like we said, well, I was just waiting for them to say at some point, but it can't be 36 pages an issue, because that's a weird number. It's kind of difficult. Me and Chris are both pretty new, so you got to ask a bit more money for a 36-page book. Or it's only like it's $5.99, so it's not bad. Like they definitely kind of kept the price as low as possible. But the fact that they said, oh no, we love that it's 36 pages. We want to try different stuff. That's really great, because like it is, because once you get to the full thing's about 150 pages over 4 issues. So it is a real, I wanted to kind of push a bit of an epic kind of vibe by the end in the kind of crime story. So you'll meet in the second issue a lot of other new characters as we kind of build out the world, and there's multiple kind of storylines weaving through it that all come back together, and having that 36 pages, it's nice. Like I think I didn't come through the 2000 AD school. I think the guys that came through 2000 AD, because like you said, they're working in like 5-page chunks. When they get given like a 22-page issue, they're like, wow, like the space that I can luxuriate in now. But I'm writing a new series which hasn't been announced yet for a different publisher, but it's going to be the longest thing I've ever done in terms of issues. But they are like 22-page issues, and I've enjoyed it, and it's been really good. And I think that I've done a pretty good job with it. But yeah, having those extra pages just to kind of really feel like you're giving the reader a nice big chunk of story is really nice. So that's been another really positive thing with Mad Cave. And they've kind of let us tell the story we wanted to do, apart from making me edit out that particular curse word I mentioned I was using apparently too much. Like, we know in England it's not that offensive, but in America it might be a problem. I was like, it's pretty offensive in England as well. We just don't care about offending each other so much. But it's basically the same comic that we would have made if we just done it ourselves on Kickstarter. Like they've let us kind of swing as hard as we want and get as violent and dark as we want, but also like have some fun. As hopefully, I think it's got that kind of Guy Ritchie tone, as well as being a little bit dark in terms of the characters, having a kind of British sense of humor, I guess. Like, so because I mean the story. So without going too much into it, as my mum gets upset when I talk about this, but my dad was a criminal when I was growing up. So like a lot of my life growing up was around these types of people. And like he went to prison for a while whilst I was kind of like 12 to 15. So I've done the going to prison to visit my dad and that kind of thing. But the thing that all the kind of various types of criminals that I've met have in common is like they're always laughing, and they're quite, despite the kind of unpleasant, nasty things that they do, they all tend to be fairly kind of jokey, not take anything too serious, kind of having a laugh type of guys. So I think the book kind of covers both angles on that it gets pretty dark, but also hopefully people enjoy spending time with the characters because they're kind of nice in moments as well and fun.
Well, just like your influences, I'm a big Guy Ritchie movie fan. Were those called Lad pictures back in the day? At least that's how they were brought to us, or in the Lad magazines of FHM.
Yeah, I can see how they might have tried and scoop them up as part of those kind of horrible magazines that were coming out when I was about 14. Which I always had like some giant breasted woman on the cover, and then like 10 different like shots that you can take to save money and get as drunk as possible or whatever. But yeah, no, I don't know what I would have called them. I guess they're like, because it does have a very specific tone, like the Guy Ritchie film, like I don't know. I guess that they tended to focus on fairly, they kind of went quite ground level, and I think when you're dealing more with the henchman than like the Godfather type character,
right?
And those guys are all a little bit more jokey and silly, and they'll mess things up because at the end of the day, like they're criminals, and they probably haven't had their interests are not going to be kind of super high end. So yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't call them lad films just because that brings up a bit of a bad image in my head. But yeah, definitely like I guess now they're just Guy Ritchie films. But yeah, I enjoy that kind of juxtaposition of you'll get the laugh and then you'll get the horrible kind of full stop of something grisly and violent happening.
Oh yeah, no, they Snatch and Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels and movies like that. No, I really adored those movies. In the 90s and early 2000s, they were a lot of fun. And yeah, no, you definitely have that vibe. Layer Cake, another movie like that. Matthew Vaughn. No, cool stuff, man. I get it, and I think you're tapping into that vibe with Mugshots. And yeah, you're right. God, you're really getting a double-sized comic for $5.99, everybody. So it's a great entry. And I know I'm not alone in enjoying this. I happen to notice that Matt Rosenberg on his Substack was praising you and everything. So that's cool.
That's been amazing. Yeah, it's been that's been actually. I mean, you mentioned James Robinson earlier, who's a writer that I love. Who like Airboy is one of my favorite comics of all time. That's such a unique and amazing comic. But I actually got a message from him today saying that he'd read it last night and thought it was fantastic. So that was a real wow. Matt's been amazing. Matt had me on his podcast in the past couple of weeks, which was very cool. As I'm sure his listeners were probably the same as your listeners were who's this guy? After mainly interviewing the biggest names in comics. But yeah, really nice to have that kind of support from people in the industry. And I think because obviously Mad Cave's a smaller publisher still, but they're building up at the moment. I think a lot with the IP stuff that they're doing, getting a lot of attention. But although, I mean, the book hasn't it's not sold crazy in the way that me and Chris are going to be going buying a house or anything off the back of the royalties, but the reaction from the comics world has been amazing. I've had really nice comments from people all over, Tom Taylor, Jill Thompson was really positive about the book. It's been really nice to have all these amazing creators seem to really enjoy it. And I mean, to be I know Chris's art is incredible. So yeah, there's an awful lot of people that are just wow, this art is amazing. I've had a few warnings because me and Chris have got 2 new pitches that we're currently sending around to different publishers. Chris, as well as being amazing, and also when he's on his focused working, he's a very fast artist. He can do a page and a half a day. He did 27 pages of mugshots in 17 days or something at one point, which was crazy. So we've got 2 pitches that we're sending around at the moment that plan is to do them concurrently so that Chris can jump on whichever one he feels most interested in on that particular day. But a few of the editors, where I said, this person messaged me saying how much they loved it. And they're be careful. They're probably going to try and steal your artist. So luckily, I think me and Chris, we have a strong enough bond that we're safe. But yeah, it's great as well, knowing how hard Chris works and how talented that he is. That people out in the world of comics are really appreciating the amazing art he's delivering on the project.
You guys are a good team, man. And believe me, I knew people that worked with Greg Smallwood before he became a rock star. And so, no, I can absolutely see that potential future in an artist like Chris and a writer like yourself, man. Truly, really entertaining book. I'm so glad that we met and in such a crazy way at C2E2, literally in one of the Artist Alley aisles. And I'm glad you recognized my voice because, as I said, when you hear the voice and then you see me, it may not be congruent. And
I mean, I knew what you looked like anyway from watching the YouTubes at points. But yeah, it was literally, I think I was at Jill's table at some point, and I just heard I was that's John Suntress. Turned around, and I think you were over with Art and Franco or something.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was crazy.
Well, I never table because I never have anything to sell, and I usually am hanging out with them if I'm not combing the aisles and networking with other creators or moderating a panel. So no, I'm really glad you said hello. And as soon as you told me, hey, Crime Comic, I'm like, well, there you go, man. I'm a sucker for that. And you absolutely deliver with Mugshots. It's out now, everybody, and from Mad Cave. You really need to check it out. Absolutely worth the $5.99 because you're getting 37 pages of story. So literally about the size of 2 comics for the price of 1. I can't recommend it enough. But dude, I'm really glad to meet you. Please stay in touch and let me know if when the next project happens and stuff. And it's a good reason to have you back.
Sure. No, it's amazing. Like, you enjoying it, John, is also a very big compliment for me, as I've been listening to you for so many years, and you've always had very fine taste in comics, and I've probably picked up an awful lot of books just off the back of enjoying stuff. So I'm really glad you like the book. And yeah, maybe once it's all out, the book's coming out. I never know how to. It's coming out every 2 months. I never know what buy that is. I don't think it's.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I think we call it bi-monthly, but yeah, as opposed to twice a month, every other month. Very good.
So yeah, every other month.
Plenty of time to jump in.
Once it's all out, it'd be great to see what you think about the
Please.
whole finished story.
Please do. Please come back when it's wrapped up, when all 4 issues are wrapped up. I'd be glad to talk about it. That would be amazing. And yeah, thanks a lot. And continued success, man. I think you're on the right path. And I hope this is the start of many other wonderful books from Jordan Thomas.
Thank you very much, John. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks a lot. Thanks, everybody, for watching. Tomorrow night, I'm going to have the guys on to talk about the wrap-up of Star Trek Discovery. So there's going to be a lot of bile in the conversation. But we're also going to talk about The Acolyte, the new Star Wars show, and catch up on Doctor Who as well. It's been a while since we've talked about a couple episodes of The Doctor. So that's happening on Thursday night. I hope you'll join us. Until then, everybody stay safe, stay happy, stay healthy.